Every year, my son forgot to wish me a happy Mother's Day. This year, I bought a beach house in Cannon Beach with all my life savings. When he showed up with a lawyer, claiming I had lost my mind, he thought I was just a lonely old woman with no one to protect me. But he had no idea I had prepared cameras, witnesses, and a plan to prove who was really crazy. My name is Margaret Thompson. I am 70 years old. And this is the story of how my own son tried to steal everything I had worked for my entire life. It was Sunday, May 12th, Mother's Day. I woke up at 6 in the morning, just like I had for the past 35 years as a teacher. Old habits die hard, I suppose. I made my coffee in the same ceramic mug David had given me when he was 12, back when he still thought I hung the moon. I set the dining table with my grandmother's lace tablecloth, the one I had saved from my mother's house in Salem. The good china came out, the Spode set I had been collecting piece by piece for decades, using it only for special occasions. I baked blueberry scones from scratch, David's favorite when he was young. The kitchen filled with that warm, buttery smell that used to bring him running downstairs on weekend mornings. I arranged fresh daffodils in the crystal vase, bright yellow ones from my garden, the same flowers I used to pick with him when he was small and still held my hand. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. I placed my phone next to my coffee cup and waited. 7 o'clock became 8. 8 became 9. I checked the phone every few minutes, making sure the ringer was on, making sure I hadn't missed anything. The screen stayed dark. No calls. No texts, nothing. Maybe he would surprise me, I thought. David always loved surprises when he was little. Maybe he was planning something special, something that would make up for all the other forgotten days. So I waited longer. I prepared lunch, making his favorite pot roast, the one with carrots and potatoes that I used to make every Sunday when he came home from Little League with grass stains on his uniform and stories about home runs. I cut the vegetables slowly or carefully, imagining his face when he walked through the door, imagining him saying, "Mom, it smells just like when I was a kid." But the door never opened. The phone never rang. At 3 in the afternoon, I did something I knew I shouldn't have done. I opened Facebook. I don't know why I tortured myself like that. Maybe I needed to see his face. Maybe some part of me still believed there was a reasonable explanation for his silence. That's when I saw it. David had posted a photo from brunch at some upscale restaurant in downtown Portland. He was smiling, raising a mimosa glass toward the camera. Next to him sat his wife Jennifer, also smiling, wearing a new dress I had never seen. There were other couples at the table, friends I didn't recognize, all laughing and enjoying their perfect Sunday morning. The caption read, "Perfect Mother's Day brunch with the people who matter most." The people who matter most. I read those words over and over until they burned themselves into my memory. The people who matter most. I wasn't in that photo. I wasn't at that restaurant. According to my own son, I wasn't one of the people who mattered most. I looked at my dining table, still set for 2. The scones had gone cold. The daffodils were starting to droop. The pot roast would feed me for a week because no one else was coming to share it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there in my kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my own foolishness, and felt something inside me crack. But this wasn't the first time. That was the worst part. This wasn't some terrible mistake or oversight. This was a pattern, and I had been too afraid to see it clearly. Last year, David had forgotten Mother's Day completely. No call, no text, nothing. When I finally called him 2 days later, he said, "Oh man, Mom, I'm so sorry. Work has been crazy. You know how it is. Always the same excuse. You know how it is." As if being busy was a valid reason to forget the woman who gave you life. The year before that, he had promised to take me to lunch. I had gotten dressed up, put on my best blue dress, the one he used to say made my eyes look pretty. I waited until 4 in the afternoon before he called to cancel. Something came up, Mom. Rain check. There was no rain check. There never was. But the memories kept coming, flooding back like water through a broken dam. His birthday, in March. I had spent $200 on a leather jacket I saw him admiring in a store window, more money than I could really afford on my teacher's pension. But he was my son. I wanted him to know I was thinking of him, that I remembered what he liked. He never thanked me. Not a call. Not a text. Not even an acknowledgement that the package had arrived. When I finally asked him about it weeks later, he said, "Oh yeah, thanks, Mom. It's nice." 3 words. That was all my sacrifice was worth to him. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. But what really broke my heart was what I discovered later. Jennifer had posted photos from David's birthday party on Instagram, a huge celebration at their house in Lake Oswego, complete with a barbecue, decorations, and at least 30 people. Friends from his construction company, neighbors, Jennifer's family, everyone laughing and having a wonderful time. I hadn't been invited. I didn't even know there was a party. When I asked David about it the next week, he said, "Oh, it was just a last-minute thing. Mom, nothing formal. We didn't want you to have to drive all the way out there. We didn't want you to have to drive." As if 20 minutes in the car was too much to ask. As if my presence at my own son's birthday party was an inconvenience. The pattern became clearer as I dug deeper into my memories. Christmas last year. We had agreed to spend it together at my house in Portland, just like we always had. I bought a 12-pound turkey, all the fixings, spent 3 days preparing. I decorated the entire house, put up the tree we had picked out together when he was 15, hung the ornaments he had made in elementary school. Everything was ready. 3 days before Christmas, David called. "Mom, change of plans," he said, his voice sounding rehearsed, distant. "We're going to spend Christmas with Jennifer's family in Bend. Her grandmother is getting older, and this might be her last Christmas. I hope you understand." Of course I understood. Family was important. But then he added, "You're welcome to come if you want, but it's going to be crowded, and it's a 3-hour drive in winter weather. I don't know if you want to make that trip." The way he said it made it clear it wasn't really an invitation. It was a formality, a way to make himself feel better about abandoning his mother on Christmas. I spent Christmas Day alone, eating leftover turkey and watching old movies on television. David never called. Jennifer never called. They posted photos from Bend, showing Jennifer's grandmother surrounded by children and grandchildren, everyone smiling around a beautiful Christmas tree. I wasn't in any of those photos because I wasn't there, because I didn't matter enough to make room for. My birthday in November was even worse. 70 years old, 7 decades of life, and my own son couldn't be bothered to remember. No call, no card, nothing. When I finally called him 2 days later, he said, "Oh God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I've been swamped at work. The Peterson project is behind schedule, and I've been pulling 16-hour days. You know how it is." There it was again. You know how it is. The universal excuse that was supposed to make everything okay. But I kept remembering, kept finding more evidence of my own invisibility. Valentine's Day. When I had sent him a card just to let him know I was thinking of him, he never acknowledged it. Easter. When I had invited him for dinner and he said he already had plans. 4th of July, when I watched from my porch as fireworks lit up the sky over Portland, wondering if he was watching the same display somewhere across town with people who actually mattered to him. The worst part wasn't the forgotten holidays or the missed calls. It was the gradual realization that I had become optional in my son's life. I was the person he called when he needed something. When his truck broke down and he needed a loan. When Jennifer was out of town and he needed someone to watch their dog. when he was between jobs and needed a place to store his tools, but for everything else, for the moments that actually mattered, I was invisible. I sat in my living room that Mother's Day evening, surrounded by photographs of David as a child, pictures of him on his first day of school, me holding his hand as we walked up to the building, pictures of him at his high school graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride. Pictures of him in his army uniform before his deployment to Afghanistan, me trying not to cry as I hugged him goodbye. When had it all changed? When had I stopped being the most important person in his world and become just another obligation? Was it when he married Jennifer? When he started his construction business, when he moved to the suburbs and decided that his old life in Portland wasn't sophisticated enough anymore? Or was it earlier than that? Was it when I worked 2 jobs to put him through college at Oregon State? When I sold my engagement ring to help him buy his first truck? When I mortgaged my house to give him the down payment for his business? Was that when I stopped being his mother and became just a source of money and support? That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to keep living like this. I wasn't going to keep waiting for love from someone who had decided not to give it to me. I wasn't going to keep setting tables for ghosts or buying gifts that went unacknowledged or celebrating holidays alone while my son posted pictures of himself with the people who matter most. I was going to do something for myself, something that was mine and mine alone, something that would remind me that I was still here, still breathing, still deserving of happiness and respect. I was going to build a new life. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I made my coffee, sat by the kitchen window that overlooked my small garden, and for the first time in decades, I didn't think about David first. I thought about me. Who was I now? What did I want? What would make me happy? I opened my laptop, the old Dell that David had given me when he upgraded to a newer model. I waited for it to load, then searched for houses on the Oregon coast. I don't know why the ocean called to me. Maybe because I had always loved the sound of waves. Maybe because when I was young, before marriage and motherhood consumed my life, I used to dream of living by the sea. I spent hours looking at listings. Small cottages, beach houses, places where I could wake up to the sound of the ocean and fall asleep to the rhythm of the tides. The prices were steep, but I had savings. Money I had put away over 35 years of teaching, money I had planned to leave to David when I died. But why wait to die? Why not use that money now, for my own happiness? I found it on the 3rd day of searching. A small house in Cannon Beach, just 2 blocks from the ocean. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with windows that faced west toward the sea. The listing showed a cozy living room with a stone fireplace and a front porch where I could sit and watch the sunset. It cost $185,000, nearly all of my savings. But I wanted it with an intensity that surprised me. I called the number in the listing. A woman answered with a warm, friendly voice. "Coastal Properties, this is Carol Jensen. I want to see the house on Hemlock Street," I said. "The one with the ocean view. Of course, when would you like to visit?" "Tomorrow." The next day, I took the bus to Cannon Beach. The 2-hour journey felt like traveling to another world. The air smelled different as we approached the coast, cleaner and fresher, full of salt and possibilities. Carol met me at the house, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "You must be Margaret," she said, giving me a hug like we were old friends. "Come on, let me show you your new home." The moment I stepped inside, I knew it was mine. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and the hardwood floors gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. The kitchen was small but perfect, with a window over the sink that looked out toward Haystack Rock. The living room had built-in bookshelves and a fireplace that looked like it had warmed many cozy evenings, but it was the sound that sealed it, the constant, peaceful sound of the ocean, like the world's most soothing heartbeat. I stood on the front porch and breathed in the sea air, feeling something inside me relax for the first time in years. "It's perfect," I told Carol. "I knew you'd love it," she said. "I could tell from your voice on the phone that this was meant to be your place." We signed the papers a week later. I transferred $185,000, nearly everything I had, and the house was mine. I didn't tell David. I didn't ask his permission or his advice. This was my decision, my life, my money. For the first time in decades, I was doing something just for me. I spent the next month preparing for the move. I packed my belongings carefully, taking only what mattered most: my books, my photographs, my grandmother's china, the quilt my mother had made for my wedding. I donated most of my furniture to charity and arranged for a small moving truck thing. The day before I left Portland, I walked through my old house one last time. This was where I had raised David, where I had nursed him through childhood illnesses and helped him with homework and celebrated his achievements. This was where I had waited for phone calls that never came and set tables for meals he never shared. But I didn't feel sad. I felt free. I moved to Cannon Beach on a Tuesday in June. The moving truck arrived early, and 2 young men helped me carry my boxes into my new home. I unpacked slowly, savoring each moment. I arranged my books on the built-in shelves, hung my favorite photographs on the walls, and set up my grandmother's china in the kitchen cabinets. That first evening, I sat on my front porch with a cup of tea and watched the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, colors so beautiful they made my chest ache. I had never seen anything so magnificent in my life. For the first few weeks, I didn't tell David where I was. I simply stopped answering his rare phone calls with the same urgency. When he called, I let it go to voicemail. When he texted, I responded hours later with brief, polite messages. I was no longer the mother who dropped everything to accommodate his schedule. A month passed, then 2. David never asked where I was or why I seemed different. He never noticed that I wasn't available at his convenience anymore, and that confirmed everything I already knew about my place in his life. But then, one Saturday morning in August, everything changed. I was watering the flowers on my front porch when my phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, and something in my stomach twisted. He hadn't called in over a month, and when he did call, it was usually because he needed something. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice unusually cheerful, almost saccharine. "How have you been? We haven't talked in forever." "I've been fine," I replied cautiously. "That's great. Listen, Jennifer and I were thinking we should come visit you. It's been way too long since we've seen you. How about this weekend?" I was so shocked I nearly dropped my watering can. Visit me, after months of treating me like I was invisible. Now he wanted to visit. "Why the sudden interest?" I asked. "What do you mean you're my mother? We miss you. We want to spend time with you." There was something false in his tone, something rehearsed. This wasn't the son who forgot my birthday and skipped Mother's Day. This was someone with an agenda. "How did you get this address?" I asked. There was a pause, just long enough to confirm my suspicions. "We went by your old house, and Mrs. Rodriguez said you had moved. She gave us your new address." A lie. I hadn't given my address to Mrs. Rodriguez or any of my old neighbors. I had been very careful about that. "I see," I said. "Well, this weekend isn't good for me." "Come on, Mom, don't be difficult. We really want to see your new place. We heard it's right on the ocean and must have cost a fortune." There it was. The real reason for his sudden interest. He had found out about the house, and now he wanted to see what I had spent his inheritance on. "I need to think about it," I said. "I'll call you back." "Mom, don't make this complicated. We're family. We just want to—" I hung up before he could finish. My hands were shaking, and my heart was pounding. After all these months of peace, of building a new life, David had found me And he was coming whether I wanted him to or not. I called Carol immediately. "Something's happening," I told her. "My son just called, and he wants to visit. He's never wanted to visit before. I think he found out about the house." "How much does he know?" Carol asked. "Enough to know it's expensive." "Carol, I'm scared. What if he tries to take it from me?" "He can't take your house, Margaret. You bought it with your own money." "But," she paused, "I have a friend who's a lawyer, Sarah Mitchell. She specializes in elder law. Maybe you should talk to her, just to be safe." The next day, I drove to Sarah's office in downtown Portland. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I told her everything about David, about his neglect, about the house, about his sudden interest in visiting. When I finished, Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Margaret, I'm going to be very direct with you. What you're describing sounds like the beginning of a pattern I've seen many times before. Adult children who ignore their elderly parents until they discover the parents have assets worth pursuing. You think he's going to try to take my house? I don't know. But I've seen cases where children claim their parents are mentally incompetent, that they were manipulated into making poor financial decisions. If David is suddenly interested in your expensive new house after years of neglect, we need to be prepared. What should I do? First, we need to document everything, every conversation, every text message, every interaction. Second, we need to get you evaluated by medical professionals who can testify that you're completely competent. And third, we need to install security cameras in your house." "You really think all that's necessary?" Sarah looked me straight in the eye. "I hope not. I hope David just wants to reconnect with his mother. But if I've learned anything in 20 years of practicing law, it's that when family members suddenly show interest in an elderly relative's finances, it's usually not out of love, so I did everything Sarah recommended. I installed cameras throughout the house, hidden but recording everything. I went to see Dr. Patricia Hayes, my physician of 10 years, who gave me a complete physical and cognitive evaluation. I visited a psychologist who assessed my mental state and decision-making capacity. Both doctors confirmed what I already knew: I was perfectly healthy, mentally sharp, and completely capable of making my own decisions. Sarah helped me set up a trust to protect the house and gathered all the documentation we might need. "If David tries anything legal," she said, "we'll be ready." But I hoped it wouldn't come to that. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe David really did just want to visit his mother. That hope died on Sunday morning when he called again. "Mom, we're coming over today. We're leaving Portland in an hour." "David, I told you this weekend wasn't good for me." "Too bad. We're already on our way. And Mom, we're bringing someone with us, a friend who wants to meet you." "What kind of friend?" "You'll see. Just have some coffee ready." He hung up before I could protest. I stood there holding the phone, my heart racing. A friend who wanted to meet me. David didn't have friends who cared about meeting his mother. He barely acknowledged having a mother most of the time. I called Carol immediately. "They're coming today and they're bringing someone with them." "I'm on my way," Carol said without hesitation. "And I'm calling Sarah. If this is what we think it is, you're not facing it alone." 2 hours later, I heard cars pulling into my driveway. I looked out the window and saw David's black pickup truck, followed by a silver sedan I didn't recognize. David got out first, wearing a suit, which was unusual for him. Jennifer emerged from the passenger seat, also dressed more formally than I had ever seen her. But it was the man who got out of the sedan that made my blood run cold. He was older, maybe 60, wearing an expensive gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He had the look of a professional, a lawyer or accountant. This wasn't a friend. This was someone David had hired. They walked up to my front door and knocked loudly, insistently. I took a deep breath, checked to make sure the cameras were recording, and opened the door. "Hi, Mom," David said. But he didn't hug me. His eyes were already scanning my house, taking in the ocean view, calculating the value. "This is quite a place you've got here." "Thank you," I said stiffly. Jennifer pushed past me without being invited in, looking around with obvious envy. "Wow, Margaret, this must have cost a fortune. How could you afford something like this on a teacher's pension?" And then the man in the suit stepped forward. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, extending his hand. "My name is Robert Sterling. I'm an attorney, and I represent your son. We need to talk." That's when I knew they hadn't come to visit, they had come to take everything from me. But before Robert Sterling could say another word, I heard Carol's voice behind me. "And I'm Carol Jensen, Mrs. Thompson's friend and real estate agent." She stepped onto the porch, followed by Sarah Mitchell, who was carrying her own briefcase. "And I'm Sarah Mitchell, attorney for Mrs. Thompson," Sarah said coolly. "I'd like to know exactly what you're doing here." David's face went white. "A lawyer, Mom." "Why do you need a lawyer?" "That's an excellent question, David," Sarah replied before I could speak. "Why would your mother need protection from her own son?" Robert Sterling cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "Mrs. Thompson, we're here because your son is concerned about your well-being. He's informed us that you recently made a significant financial decision, spending your entire life savings on this property, and he's worried that someone may have taken advantage of you." "Taken advantage of me," I repeated, my voice stronger than I felt. "By whom?" "Well," Sterling continued, "elderly individuals are often targeted by unscrupulous real estate agents and financial advisors who convince them to make unwise purchases." Carol stepped forward, her voice deadly calm. "I'm the real estate agent who sold this house to Mrs. Thompson, and I can assure you that no one manipulated her. She came to me of her own free will, with her own money, and made her own informed decision." "And who are you to her?" Jennifer snapped. "Some stranger who shows up out of nowhere and suddenly acts like you care more about her than her own family." "I'm here," Carol said, "because your mother-in-law asked me to be here, because apparently she knew you were coming, and she knew she would need support." "This is ridiculous," David said, his mask of concern slipping. "Mom, tell these people to leave. We need to talk as a family." "No," I said, my voice coming out louder than I expected. "They stay. Now tell me exactly what you want." Sterling opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "Mrs. Thompson, your son has prepared these papers for your protection. They would establish a trust for this property, with David as the trustee. You would continue to live here, but he would manage the financial aspects to ensure no one can take advantage of you." Sarah snatched the documents before I could reach for them. Her eyes moved rapidly across the pages, and with each paragraph she read, her expression grew darker. "This is unbelievable," she finally said. "Absolutely unbelievable." "What's wrong?" I asked. "These documents aren't to protect you, Margaret. They're to rob you. If you signed these papers, you would lose all rights to this property. David would have complete control. He could sell it whenever he wanted, evict you whenever he wanted, and you couldn't do anything about it." "That's not true," Sterling protested. "The trust clearly states that Mrs. Thompson can live here until her death." "Yes, as long as they allow it," Sarah countered. "But it also gives them the right to make any decision about the property without her consent, including selling it if they deem it necessary for her care. It's a clause so broad it essentially gives them carte blanche to do whatever they want." I looked at those papers in Sarah's hands, then at my son. "David, is this true? Did you come here to steal my house?" "It's not stealing, Mom. It's protecting you. Look at what you did. You spent all your money on this place without even telling us. That's not normal behavior." "Not normal," I said, feeling anger rise in my chest like a tide. What's not normal is a son who forgets his mother exists until he finds out she has something valuable. Mom, that's not fair. Fair. I looked at him with absolute clarity for the first time in years. Where were you on Mother's Day? David, where were you on my birthday? Where were you when I needed you? Don't start with that again, he said, his voice turning cold. Where were you? I repeated. Silence. I'll tell you where you were. You weren't here. You were never here. But now that you want something, here you are with a lawyer and papers trying to take the only thing that's mine. Jennifer stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. Look, Margaret, we understand you're upset with us. Maybe we haven't been the best at keeping in touch. We admit that, but this is too much. Spending all your money on a house you don't need, cutting yourself off from your family, this isn't normal. I didn't cut myself off from anyone, I said. I simply stopped being available every time you needed something. I stopped waiting by the phone for calls that never came. Sarah moved closer to me, speaking in a low voice. Margaret, I need you to tell me something. Do you have records of all your interactions with David? Text messages, call logs, everything. Yes, I said, everything, just like you told me to. Good, because we're going to need them. She turned back to Sterling. Your proposal is unacceptable, and I suggest you review Oregon statutes on financial exploitation of the elderly, because what you're attempting here falls perfectly within that definition. We're not exploiting anyone, Sterling said. But for the first time, he sounded uncertain. No, then explain to me why your clients showed up unannounced with legal documents already prepared, pressuring a 70-year-old woman to give up control of her property. Explain why they didn't consult with her first, why they didn't respect her decision to buy this house with her own money. Because we're worried, David insisted. Is that so hard to understand? We're her family. We have the right to be worried. The problem, Carol said, is that you were never worried before. Only now. Only when money is involved. You don't know anything about our family, Jennifer yelled. I know enough, Carol replied calmly. I know your mother-in-law spent Mother's Day alone. I know she spent Christmas alone. I know you never visited her, never called her. And now suddenly you're the most concerned son in the world. You know what I think you saw an opportunity. A house on the ocean worth nearly $200,000, and you decided that money should be yours. $185,000, David repeated, his eyes widening. You paid $185,000 for this house. There was the final confirmation. He didn't know exactly how much it cost. He just knew it was valuable. That was all your money, he continued, his voice rising. All your savings. And you spent it without consulting us. Why would I need to consult you? I asked. It's my money. That money was our inheritance, Jennifer said. And finally, she admitted what they really wanted. Your inheritance, I repeated slowly. Money that I haven't died to give you yet. Money that I earned, that I saved, and you think you're entitled to it. You always said you'd leave it to us, David said. You always said that when you died. Everything would be ours. Yes, when I died. Not now. Not while I'm still alive and need that money to live my life. Your life? Jennifer scoffed. What life? You're a 70-year-old woman living alone. What do you need a beach house for? To be happy? I said simply, to have a place where I don't feel invisible, where I don't have to beg for attention, where I can simply exist without feeling like I'm a burden. Sterling tried to regain control. Mrs. Thompson, your son is right to be concerned. Such a large purchase at your age, without consulting family, could be a sign of cognitive decline. Cognitive decline. Sarah's voice was dangerous. Are you seriously suggesting that a perfectly lucid woman who made a sound financial decision, who consulted with professionals, who did her due diligence, has cognitive decline simply because her son disagrees with her decision? That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. And I warn you that if you continue down that path, I will file a formal complaint with the Oregon State Bar. What you're doing here is harassment and manipulation, and I will not allow it to continue." "Sarah is right," I said, finding my voice and my strength. "I want all of you to leave. Now." "Mom, we can't leave like this," David said. "We need to resolve this." "There's nothing to resolve. This is my house. I bought it with my money, and I will never sign any documents giving you control over my life." David's face twisted with anger. "You'll regret this. Mom, you're going to end up alone, completely alone. And when you need us, we won't be there." "You know what, David," I said, looking at my son with perfect clarity. "I was already alone. I've been alone for years. You're just making it official." "This isn't over," he threatened. "Is that a threat?" Sarah asked. "Because I hope you know that this entire conversation is being recorded. Every word, every threat documented." David looked around and saw the cameras for the first time. His face went pale. "You were recording us?" "Yes," I said. "Everything has been recorded since you arrived." "This is illegal," Sterling exclaimed. "Actually, it's not," Sarah corrected. "This is private property. Mrs. Thompson has every right to record what happens in her own home. And believe me, this video is going to be very useful if you decide to pursue any legal action." Sterling closed his briefcase quickly. "This conversation is over." "Yes, it is," I said. "Now all of you leave my property and don't come back unless you're willing to treat me with respect." But as they walked toward their cars, I knew this wasn't over. I could see it in David's eyes, the determination, the entitlement. He wasn't going to give up. He was going to find another way to get what he thought was rightfully his, and I was going to be ready for him. 2 weeks after that confrontation, I was tending to my garden when the mail carrier handed me a certified letter. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letterhead read, "Sterling & Associates Legal Services," and the words inside made my blood run cold. David was suing me. He was asking a judge to declare me mentally incompetent and appoint him as my legal guardian. If he won, he would have complete control over my life, my money, and my house. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built, would be his. I called Sarah immediately. "I already know," she said before I could speak. "I received notification this morning. But Margaret, don't panic. We've been preparing for this. We have everything we need to fight back." The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later at the Multnomah County Courthouse. Those 6 weeks were the longest of my life. Sarah prepared me like a coach training for the Olympics. She made me practice what I would say, how I would sit, what I would wear. "You have to look competent," she told me. "Confident, alert, in control. You can't hesitate. You can't show weakness, and you absolutely cannot cry, no matter what they say about you." I practiced in front of my bathroom mirror every morning, memorizing answers to questions they might ask. Carol helped me prepare emotionally, reminding me why I was fighting, why this mattered. "They're going to try to make you feel guilty," she warned me. "They're going to paint you as a selfish mother who abandoned her family. But you know the truth, and that truth is your power." Sarah also gathered witnesses. Father Michael O'Brien from St. Mary's Catholic Church, where I had volunteered for 15 years, agreed to testify about my character and mental clarity. Mrs. Helen Rodriguez, my neighbor from Portland, would speak about how David never visited me. Tom Wilson, who owned the grocery store where I shopped for a decade, could attest to my independence and sound judgment. Most importantly, Dr. Patricia Hayes and the psychologist who had evaluated me were prepared to testify that I was in perfect mental health. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 5 a.m. I showered, dressed in my best navy blue suit, and drove to Portland with Sarah and Carol. The courthouse was imposing, all concrete and glass. But I walked through those doors with my head held high. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected, but it felt enormous when I saw David and Jennifer sitting at the plaintiff's table with Robert Sterling. David wouldn't look at me directly, but Jennifer stared with barely concealed hatred. Judge Patricia Williams entered at 9 a.m. sharp. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Case number 4729. The clerk announced, David Thompson versus Margaret Thompson, petition for declaration of mental incapacity and appointment of guardian. Sterling stood first. Your Honor, we are here today because a concerned son fears for his mother's well-being. Margaret Thompson, age 70, recently made an alarming financial decision. She spent her entire life savings, $185,000, on a property she doesn't need, far from her family and support system. This impulsive decision raises serious concerns about her ability to make sound financial judgments. I bit my tongue, remembering Sarah's warning not to react. Furthermore, Sterling continued, Mrs. Thompson has isolated herself from her family. She moved without telling them, refused their help, and hired lawyers as if her own son were a threat. This paranoid behavior suggests cognitive decline. He called David to testify first. My son walked to the witness stand, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Then he began to lie. My mother was always strong, he said, his voice perfectly modulated to sound concerned. She raised me alone after my father died. She worked hard, sacrificed everything for me. But in recent years, I've noticed changes. She's become forgetful, confused. Sometimes she repeats stories. Sometimes she calls multiple times about the same thing. Every word was a fabrication, and we both knew it. Then suddenly, without telling anyone, she bought this expensive house in a place she'd never even visited. When we tried to talk to her about it, she became defensive, aggressive. She accused us of terrible things, said we didn't love her, that we had abandoned her. None of that is true, Your Honor. We're just worried about her. How often did you visit your mother before this purchase? Judge Williams asked. David hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. Well, not as often as we would have liked. We both work full-time, and we have our own responsibilities. But we called regularly. How often? Another pause. Once or twice a month. Sarah and I exchanged glances. We had phone records proving he had called exactly 4 times in the past year. Sterling asked more questions, and David answered with more lies, painting me as a confused, easily manipulated elderly woman who had lost touch with reality. Then Sterling called Jennifer, who was even more convincing in her false concern. She spoke about how much they loved me, how worried they were, how they just wanted to protect me from people who might take advantage of my condition. When they finished, Judge Williams turned to Sarah. The defense may present its case. Sarah stood up and everything changed. Your Honor, what we're witnessing here is not a case of an elderly woman with cognitive decline. It's a case of financial elder abuse. It's that simple. And I'm going to prove it. She walked to the center of the room and activated a video screen. The first image was from Mother's Day. My dining table set for 2, the phone silent beside my coffee cup. This is Mother's Day this year, Sarah said. Mrs. Thompson prepared a meal. She waited for her son. He never came. He never called. Then she showed screenshots from David's Facebook page. The brunch photos, the smiling faces, the caption, "Perfect Mother's Day brunch with the people who matter most." Instead, Sarah continued, he was celebrating with other people, the people who matter most. His words, not mine. David sank lower in his chair as Sarah presented more evidence. Phone records showing the truth about his calls, text messages revealing his requests for money, documentation of every forgotten birthday, every canceled plan, every broken promise in the past 12 months. Sarah said, David Thompson called his mother exactly 4 times. He visited her 0 times, but the moment he discovered she had purchased valuable property, suddenly he showed up with a lawyer and legal documents demanding she surrender control. She played the audio recording from that day at my house. The judge listened intently as David's voice filled the courtroom, revealing his true motivations, his sense of entitlement to my money. When the recording ended, Sarah called me to testify. I walked to the witness stand on steady legs, raised my right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Then I told my story, calmly and clearly, without tears or dramatics. I explained why I had bought the house, how I had researched the decision, why I had needed to build a new life. Sterling tried to trip me up during cross-examination, but I was ready for him. When he asked about my memory, I recited the dates and details of every interaction with David over the past year. When he suggested I was resentful, I explained the difference between resentment and hurt. When he questioned my judgment, I described the careful process I had used to evaluate and purchase my home. Then Sarah called our witnesses. Dr. Hayes testified about my perfect mental health. The psychologist spoke about my emotional stability and sound decision-making. Father O'Brien described my years of volunteer work and sharp intellect. Each testimony built an unshakable case for my competence. Finally, Sarah presented the financial records showing that my house purchase was not impulsive, but carefully planned, that I had consulted with professionals, that I had made an informed and responsible decision. Your Honor, Sarah concluded, what we have here is not an incompetent mother. We have a mother who finally said enough, who finally chose herself over children who had been neglecting and exploiting her for years. And those children cannot stand it, not because they're worried about her well-being, but because they're worried about their inheritance. Judge Williams reviewed her notes for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she looked up. I have heard enough, she said. The petition for declaration of mental incapacity is denied. Mrs. Thompson is clearly competent to make her own decisions, and she has every right to live her life as she chooses. I felt the air return to my lungs. Furthermore, the judge continued, I find this lawsuit was frivolous and motivated by financial gain. The petitioners will pay all court costs, and I warn Mr. Thompson that any future attempts to harass or manipulate his mother will be met with the full force of the law. She struck her gavel. Case dismissed. Sarah hugged me. Carol cried, and I stood there, paralyzed by the magnitude of what had just happened. I had won. I had defended myself and survived. As we left the courthouse, I saw David one last time. He was standing by his truck, shoulders slumped in defeat. For just a moment, I felt sorry for him. He was still my son, still the little boy I had raised and loved. But then I remembered everything he had put me through, everything he had tried to steal from me, and the pity faded. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. That night, back in my house by the sea, I sat on my porch and watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. I listened to the waves and felt a peace deeper than anything I had ever known. It wasn't the peace of resignation or denial. It was the peace of someone who had fought for herself and won. 2 years have passed since that day in court. David never contacted me again, and I'm okay with that. I've learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most, who see you and value you and choose to stay. I found that family in Carol, who became the sister I never had, in the neighbors who bring me vegetables from their gardens, in the other women I've met who also had the courage to choose themselves over toxic relationships. Every morning, I wake up to the sound of the ocean. Every evening, I watch the sunset from my porch. And every day, I'm reminded that it's never too late to start over, never too late to demand the respect you deserve, Never too late to build a life that's truly your own. If you're listening to this story and you see yourself in it, remember this: you are enough, exactly as you are. You deserve to be seen, valued, and chosen. And if the people in your life can't give you that, maybe it's time to find new people, new places, new beginnings. Because life is too precious to waste waiting for love that will never come.